Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Power Label Summit. My name is Nikki, and I am your host. I'm going to show you how to step into your power, free yourself from expectations, and live the life you always wanted. Today's special guest is Dr. Lisa Chu. Dr. Lisa Chu is a soul, body, mind life coach and multidisciplinary artist. As a coach, Lisa supports adults in healing, transformation, and creating healthier, kinder, more honest versions of themselves. She enjoys encouraging people of all ages to recognize and explore their own creative potential, which Lisa herself has explored through research and practice at the intersection of expressive arts and healing for the past decade, and performing arts and teaching for the past 3 decades. Her life coaching interests have included physician's burnout, recovery of joy and vitality through creative practice, reconnection of the body with nature, and the role of improvisational embodied creative process in the healing of intergenerational trauma. I'm so excited to have you, Lisa. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about you and your journey of coming to where you are today.
Thank you, Nikki. I'm so excited to be here and to speak with all of you who are watching this summit. It's such an important topic, freeing ourselves from expectations and naming the life that we want to live and then stepping into it. I speak to you from a place of not having grown up with the encouragement to do any of this. I am the daughter of immigrants from Taiwan and China, but I was born in the United States in the Midwest. And I had very, very clear expectations, some of which weren't even named, but it was just a feeling in our house that there's just certain things that I'm supposed to do. There's a certain way to be successful. There's a certain path. For me, it looked like studying classical music from the age of 3, both violin and piano, doing a lot of performing and competing throughout my childhood, ending up going to Harvard as an undergraduate, getting a biochemical sciences degree, and then getting a medical degree. And I say all of that in one breath, even though it was a huge amount of experience there, because all of that to me was sort of a given. It was the minimum standard in our family, like that's just what you do. I was lucky, in quotes, enough to actually be able to do all of that, get through it. But where I found myself really before going to medical school was realizing I didn't really want to do that. It wasn't my desire. It was something that definitely was expected of me. And I remember actually my 3rd year of medical school having this epiphany moment where I realized I don't have to do a residency like everyone else. And that sounds like a very obvious statement, but as a medical student with that life coming into it, I literally never considered anything off book, off the page of what was possible until really that moment. And I woke up and said, these 20 options that they're telling me are next for my life are not the full list. And so everything sort of cascaded from that moment of realizing that. And I ended up not doing a residency, not practicing medicine. It was not my dream. I ended up working in a venture capital firm first out of medical school, first as an unpaid intern, which was sort of unheard of. They didn't understand why I would want to do that. I ended up getting hired by that firm and then spent 3 years there learning a lot about a whole new world that I had zero idea about. And then during that is when I came into contact with one of my first childhood dreams, which was to have my own violin school. And I remember the day that occurred, that I heard myself say that if I could do anything, I would open a violin school. And within 3 months of saying that, I was actually on a plane. I always wanted to live in California. I was living in the Midwest at the time. I always wanted to live in California. I was on a plane to California, scoping out how I would create this school. And then 3 months after that, I moved here and started the school the fall of that year. So that was my first, those were my first two leaps off of the path of expectation. And that, I say that because it's a process, and I'm going to talk more about process later. But I think so much of expectation and why it keeps us bound is that it's about results, and the idea that you have to know what's going to happen before you start something, or you can't start. And I think that that's the number one block to our potential, our creative potential, is to have to know everything in the beginning. And that's really what expectation is about. It's saying that we know that this is the right way, and that anything else is not okay. So I just will finish up sort of my background and how I got to this point by saying that so 15 years ago is when I moved to California from the Midwest by myself. I'd never lived in California. I didn't know anyone, but I had this dream in my heart, and I had a very, very clear vision of what I wanted to do. And with a lot of hustle, but also luck, I was able to start and build the school, and I did that for 6 years. And really the event that started this phase of my life as a coach and as someone interested in holistic healing and creativity and how we become more whole and real and strong in a way that's not about controlling people, started with my own experience with burnout. And that happened between years 5 and 6 of my school. And it was really confusing to me because I was successful on paper. My business metrics were all in line. I was a spreadsheet queen, and I was expanding. I'd moved into a commercial space. I had a lease. I had an employee. I had, customers, clients, community, but I was feeling exhausted in my own body and more disconnected from my own dream. And I just really didn't know how that could be because I built it. I was my own boss. I should have been happy. I should have been thriving, but I was not. And this point of confusion really was new to me. And if you can imagine listening to my background before that, I had been successful at everything that I'd ever done. And, at the time when you're going through school, you sort of look up to people like that have all the grades and the schools, and you think, wow, that must be great. In retrospect, that lack of experience with failure was another thing that was holding me back. Because if you get up to a certain point and have never really experienced that feeling of, I don't know what is going on and I don't know what to do, I think it gets harder the later, the longer you go with this idea that you're safe from that. So that moment of burnout came to me as physical exhaustion and just sort of feeling like I was dragging myself through life, but I was supposed to be living my dream. And I literally just had to surrender, to say, I don't know. Everything that I've done up to this point to be successful, which was work harder, get bigger, expand, was not working anymore. And I didn't have anyone to turn to because all of my friends were sort of on the same path. All of the people paying me in the school were interested in being on that path and having that for their kids who were my students. And so I had this expectation to uphold an image of having it all together, pushing forward, working hard and harder. That was the only direction to go. And so this was a Christmas break of 2008. where all I wanted to do was sleep. I actually took myself on a solo trip to Santa Fe, New Mexico, rented a little casita. This was before Airbnb. This is like, might have been like the early days of VRBO, but I just had to get away and I did yoga every day, and I just took care of myself and listened and looked at the mountains and did whatever I wanted for a few days. And that, as I look back, that was really radical, because normally during the holidays, I was supposed to go home and spend all that time with my family and, play the role of whatever, sister, daughter, aunt. But I knew I needed time to myself. And that was really an opening. And I'll just say, because there's a whole other chapter that opens from that we can talk about later, that when I surrendered and said, I don't know, and I opened to being with myself, listening, taking good care of my body, eating good food that's nutritious and nourishing, all I could say is that miracles or magic started to happen in terms of teachers arriving in my life and a new path starting to unfold. And so I'll just pause there, because that's, I think, my first, really the message that one of the first messages that I want to make sure that you, the audience, is receiving, that when we get to that point of not knowing and confusion and nothing working, it's a very, very precious moment that many of the people that put the expectations on us tell us to avoid that at all costs. And what I have learned now, having lived from that moment out 11 years, is those are the ripe moments where the magic happens. And there's a set of tools and skills and awarenesses that we can develop to get excited about the discomfort of that moment. It's not pure excitement. There's always a little bit of dread there too, but to get excited in terms of, wow, that something is happening for me. And it gets easier in terms of just being aware that this is the process. I don't think that the discomfort gets any easier as we go through cycles of change in life, but our comfort with this is how the process of life unfolds becomes easier. And that's actually the gift of the thing that I've written for the audience, that it's about that. It's about that whole embracing of the unknown.
I love your story because I come from a very similar background where sometimes like things aren't said, but those expectations always loom over our heads. And regardless of where you come from, there's always some type of social expectation out there that says you have to do better, or you have to be at a certain point in your life, or you should be having a house, a certain job, a car, a husband, whatever it may be. And society kind of dictates that. But like you said, the unknown is the beautiful part. For me, growing up, like I felt like I had to have my life together, because everyone around me was there. Like, oh, your cousin graduated from this and is making 6 figures in banking, or this person is becoming a doctor, lawyer, whatever that may be. And I always felt like I was inadequate. So for so long, I had all these incredible like emotional traumas and mental health issues because it blinded me. It blinded me to keep pursuing this light that was not meant for me, like this path that was not meant for me. And lo and behold, I suffered from anxiety every single day. I woke up and I felt like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I have no idea what I want to do. I have no idea who I even was anymore, because I was putting myself in this box that everyone said, you need to fit this box. So I was trying to fit this box and I couldn't fit the box. And just trying to fit that box was mentally exhausting. emotional, like even days where I don't do anything, days where I just lay in bed like a sack of potatoes because I don't want to think about it, I don't want to feel it, I don't want to feel that pain. And having that, I would still feel exhausted even if I laid in bed all day long. So when you touch on the aspect of not knowing is okay, and that's the biggest message that I want to put out there, is not knowing is perfectly okay, because there are ways and there are things you can do to kind of discover yourself. And when I shifted my life to really focusing on me and not focusing on anyone else, that was that was a huge change for me. Art has been a big thing, and I want you to speak on that with my audience, because I know you know more on the back end of what art really does for you, like self-expression. What does that do for us mentally, like physically?
So I thank you, Nikki, for sharing that about yourself. And a couple of things I wanted to say just in response to that. Comparison is just so, so deadly to our tender selves coming out. I mean, I feel like every single time we express ourselves truthfully, there's a tenderness because it's never been said before. It's never existed before that moment. And so um, that's a moment of vulnerability. And when we're compared to others, it immediately shuts down that place that has to feel free in order to grow. And so how do the arts help with this? And I also wanted to speak to kind of losing ourselves, not knowing who we are, because we are always looking at these comparisons. And it is within families, within cultures, within societies. And if we look at now with the number of social media images that each of us are seeing every day, if we don't become conscious about that, it's just very, very easy to fall into despair. Seeing images that are constructed by other people to create basically an advertising message about whatever it is, that so often aren't revealing the hard parts of people's lives or the process, because a snapshot can't really reveal a whole process. So I wanted to show a little bit of my process, but I'll start by answering the question about how do the arts help us with freeing ourselves from comparison, expectation, and helping us contact who we really are. And again, I'm coming from this from at least 3 different perspectives. One is my childhood and the way that I was taught growing up, which was like very much about right and wrong and about experts and everyone else and comparison. So my point is that it's not all just the arts, but it's how we approach the arts that can be healing or can actually produce wounds and trauma that we can then use the arts in a different way to heal from, which is my story. So I want to tell this one story because it is, if people read the ebook that I'm providing, this story will help sort of put a little bit of that in context. And that's my Play the Wrong Note story. And this is happened during 2009. So this is the year after this burnout, physical immobilization. I was in my bed, couldn't get out of bed from back pain. That was my wake-up call. Fast forward, I find myself in an improvisation workshop. And keep in mind at this time, my identity is very, very tied to being Dr. Chu, makeup, high heels, suits, perfection in front of a room, telling people what to do. That was how I was taught. And I felt that was my responsibility to teach that way. And that I was a classical musician, and my teacher had always said, all other music is just less than. So I'm in an improvisation workshop, and I'm planning to just watch politely while other people do this thing that I don't do. And I brought my violin, and I'm hiding behind the facilitator as 30 other people in my cohort. I was doing a sound healing training program, but 30 other people in my cohort are having a great time doing this blues groove improvisation, and I'm just watching. And at that moment, the facilitator turns around, points to me, and says, "You, solo." And that moment of total terror struck me, because here I am, and now I'm in front of a room and everyone's looking at me and I have no idea what to do. And I wasn't taught this. I didn't listen to this kind of music. I didn't know what to contribute, and I just froze. And the teacher said to me, the facilitator said, "Play the wrong note." And I heard the words and they washed over me like compassion that I had never had from a teacher before. But I also wanted to know which wrong note he wanted me to play, because it was so programmed that there's just like the right note, and then what else is there? So he took my finger and placed and held it on the violin fingerboard and said, "Play that." And I'm sitting there, and keep in mind everybody's watching me, and my bow arm would not move. So what I realized in that moment is that I had been so programmed to just only play these notes. And the metaphor is that this is the near limited range of possibilities for what's okay and how to live. We're just these kind of slots. And play the wrong note was this invitation to just like choose something that's not in those slots and try it. What is it going to do? But my training had said, no, you avoid that. You don't go there. And to the point where my muscle memory was so wired that I wasn't going to go there. So there were all sorts of messages associated with doing things wrong or not being right. And especially at that time, I was the teacher in my own school. And I realized so many things in that moment that, I mean, not all of it came to me in that moment, but I just knew that there was something on the other side of this. And in that workshop, I didn't just all of a sudden become an improviser, but it turned on the light that said, I need to go in a different direction and explore what else is possible for me. How do I let go? And so that led to, many different experiences with freeing the body. So the body's part of our creativity, the way we can move and breathe in our bodies. So I had been a yoga practitioner, but I kind of rededicated myself to that. And then I stumbled upon, and then I started to teach myself how to improvise on the violin. And that sort of led to, I still do that today. But that was a journey, because every time I picked up my violin, I would hear the old messages of, this sounds, it's just criticism, inner critic. But I overcame them. I did things like showing up on stage and performing without knowing what I was going to do, just, listening and responding to what was there. And went to a lot of open mics, played with people of all different genres, and just really expanded what was possible. So that's one example in the music realm of sort of like going outside the boundaries of genres or what you think you are, and opening into all the possibilities that are outside of that, which is really infinite. So play the wrong note is that it's infinite. So really I keep contemplating that mantra to this day. What does it mean? What does it mean in my life at every moment to play the wrong note, to take a risk, challenge myself to do something I haven't considered before, and to risk all the ramifications, the fear of judgment, the fear of comparison. It's still there. And so I wanted to the second piece of this, because violin was like so close to my heart, having been trained on that as 3 years old, and then having a school. And by the way, I did end up closing my school because I really couldn't stand in front of the room and teach the same way that I was teaching. I needed to go on this journey of exploring myself, finding out who I am, how I would teach, or how I would be if I weren't a teacher. And I stumbled upon visual art. I'll just say that I stumbled upon a couple artist friends. I had never picked up a paintbrush, art supplies, anything. I didn't consider myself a visual artist, but these two friends just invited me to their studio and put out materials and said, here, try them. Literally just was like anything. There was no right or wrong way to do it. Just like explore. That's what started me. And you can see I'm coming to you now from my actual art space in my current living space. And I do that for a couple of reasons. I mean, I love this mess of process. I have all my materials. It maybe looks like a mess to you, but I know what's here. This is actually where I make important contact with my inner feelings, thoughts, and experiences and processes. And so I think that a lot of us who were ignored as children, basically, in terms of our inner lives, that we were just sort of pulled around and told to do things that other people were doing, or just given sort of general directions about life and not invited to discover our own expression. This practice, this has carried me through, now it's been 6 years that I've been doing art journals. And I'll just show just a couple of pages, like as an example. Like this is a spread that I did about, I was actually working through a moment in these past 2 weeks where I was noticing certain patterns that I have that do not serve relationships well, my relationship destroying thoughts, and then my relationship cultivating skills. And this just sort of came out. I just started putting paint down and these colors, and I sort of imagined 2 different buildings. And I just am giving examples of, I do a lot of things in here. Like this is just a quote that was an affirmation quote, and things that I cut out of magazines that inspire me. This was also, I was taking notes on a podcast or class that I was listening to. And then this was something I got on a Zoom session with one of my art therapist friends, and we both did self-portrait art. So in these pages, what happens for me is the blank, which to me is every time you get on a blank page, it's another invitation to play the wrong note, and it's the fear. It's the, what do I do? What, is anyone going to like it? And what's beautiful about this, and I actually just shared it with everybody watching this video, but I don't show them to anyone. This is not about selling work. It's not about, I did that. I've been in shows and I've sold work, and I've done the whole Instagram route of posting every day and getting all the likes. And I found that because of my background, my psychological background, that all of that can cross into the territory of despair pretty quickly, because it involves racking up approval and likes and counting and measuring and trying to meet the expectations of this imagined audience. So I've had to be very careful about protecting my process and navigating this idea that, yes, I have to have some sort of interaction with the world, some conversation where I'm offering and sharing this. And this summit, being invited by you, Nikki, to create something to give to your audience, our audience, brought up all of that. And and a lot of it has been processed here, but I wanted to share that. Here's what it looked like for me. It was like, yes, desire. And then immediately after that, a little bit of fear of like perfectionism and freezing. And then comparison, like going to read other people. What are other people doing for freebies? And then finding some flow and getting into some really good idea and writing days and seeing all these possibilities. And then again, fear, like, will I be able to get it done by the deadline? And then I had to really turn to my self-care practices. And I write about this I ended up writing an ebook for this summit, which I could see becoming an online class if I, want to. I don't want to overwhelm myself, but it's really an outline for an online class, which I wanted to do again for a long time. But self-care, taking walks, doing my yoga, alone time, doing my art journaling, getting support from friends online in, groups and one-on-one, writing. All of these things are now how I have learned how to take care of myself as I, grow, step forward and do new things. So there's this, I'm learning that this is all part of it, that the desire to do something new comes with the fears. And then how do you take care of that fear? How do you get back into flow? How do you just feel everything that comes up, not to try to avoid it or deny it, but how do I feel it and see it and process it? And that's a lot of, this creative process, using a lot of different materials. I love how it's like everything I wasn't allowed to do as a child, which is just use as much of anything, everything that I want, in any way that I want, and follow no rules. And love, the most important thing is that I love just sitting and flipping through the pages of this and seeing myself, my process, what I was going through, thinking, what I was inspired by, what I was challenged by, and then, colors that I wanted to play with that day. And nothing is planned. It's completely, there's a lot of learning that went into putting the studio together and learning what the materials are and, practice, but it's a totally different kind of practice than, growing up doing violin. This is like play. This is play, curiosity that leads to, oh, what's that? Like seeing a material that someone's using on Instagram or something, and then just trying that material for myself and making it my own. So, how the arts can heal is when we bring an attitude of no judgment to the practice of the arts. So those things both have to be there, that our creativity is invited to the page, but there's no judgment on what creativity looks like or has to be. Because I think that a lot of, if you go to like a standard art class, a lot of it in any field, dance, music, drawing, painting, acting, a lot of it is technique based and trying to do things correctly by some standard that has been set by someone. And as adults trying to do this work of discovering ourselves, it is actually counterproductive. And finding the places, the ways of doing art that free us is what I'm passionate about, what I've done for myself, and what I want to share more of, just examples. Because I think seeing these examples, it's like, whoa, I didn't know you could do that, is what I remember thinking when I first saw this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your story and those vulnerabilities behind it, and even the vulnerabilities of you being invited to the summit. I'm so grateful to have you, because I do come from a very similar background, and it's true, when I'm starting a new adventure or I'm starting a new project, the underlying question is, how do I get it perfect? And when we think about the process and how to get something perfect, just that thought is so debilitating. It's like, I have to sit here and I will literally sit and spend 30 to an hour trying to write an email to one person. And my coach says, don't worry about that. Just copy and paste and, change one sentence out. And I said, no, absolutely not. It has to be perfect, because I want a response from this person. And just doing that. And I think so many people have been conditioned to do that, because we've been conditioned by society. There's a right and a wrong, but we kind of forget that there's there's a range of colors to the rainbow. It doesn't have to be just red and blue, right? Like there's that in between where you can be free flowing, and there's space to create, and there's space to explore, and there's also space to make mistakes. And when you said like play the wrong note, that made me smile so big, because my whole life was, oh, you can't play the wrong note. You can't play the wrong note, because if you play the wrong note, all of these awful things are going to happen to you. And when we're kind of in the process of, I can't play the wrong note, I can't play the wrong note, there's no leeway, there's no creative freedom, there's nothing that and I'll provide an example for me. I just couldn't, right? I couldn't do it. And I just gave up. And I said, I'm not even going to bother try. I'm not even going to bother trying, because what's the point? And even if I try to do it, it's never going to reach the potential that everyone else wanted me to be at. So then I'm just not going to do it. And that was one of the biggest downfalls in my life, when one day I woke up and I said, what is my purpose in life? Am I just here to follow a blueprint and come out the other end pretending to be happy? And practicing art and practicing creative expressionism and not being perfect in what I was doing, I found so much freedom. Like that empowered me, because here I am spreading a message and telling people like, do whatever your heart desires and try, and it's okay to fail. And trust me, I failed so many times, but every time you fail, it gets a little bit easier. It's like, okay, I'm just gonna fail. It's okay. Like, it's okay. We'll get back up and life moves on, versus this thought process of, I can't fail, I can't fail. And because I can't fail, my life is so mundane. It's the same boring steps over and over and over again. So I really appreciate you sharing that with me and with the audience, because it's a huge message. And my summit is about empowerment, but we cannot be empowered to do anything if we don't have any creative freedom, or any way to heal ourselves from all these broken experiences that we've been conditioned to follow our whole life. My next question for you is like, through your processes, what do you encourage your clients to do? Like, what are some things that our audience can do today to kind of break free from all of these expectations and start their own personal explorative journey?
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. I feel like, and I was thinking about a lot of this when I was writing the ebook. Excuse me, I was about to cough. I'm glad I didn't cough when you were talking. I really feel still, after all these years, that self-care is where it starts, and where so much blossoms from. And everyone has what that means, at a different stage of our life. We know what self-care means to us. But for me, in the very, very beginning, I'll say that the one radical act that I did was I looked at how I started my day. What was the very, very first thing that I consumed upon opening my eyes in the morning? And when I observed that at that time, I had a BlackBerry at that time. I don't know if you even know what that is, but it was like before the iPhones, it was this device. And I had it by my bed, and I would check my email right when I woke up in the morning. And that would sort of like send me catapulting out of bed to react to things. And that was my normal at that time. And the very first change I made was not to do that first, but to get out of bed and just literally sit on the floor next to my bed where there was a window, and it looked out at a redwood tree. And I sat in silence for just 10 minutes a day before anything else. And it sounds so simple, but it actually changed everything, because suddenly I had a moment to check in and listen for what I wanted to do with the day, or how I might have envisioned you know, going through my day versus reacting to whatever's in the inbox first. And that was my very first act of self-care. But it really expands to so many areas. It expands to our boundaries and relationships, what we're saying no to. And so that would be my second tip is, what can you say no to? What can you stop doing now that might, that you haven't considered stopping before, but you're open to exploring how your life might change if you stopped doing one thing that you are now doing. And and then, of course, the body. I feel like so much of our culture is encouraging us to stay in a constant state of stress response and just kind of running in a circle of fight or flight, tension, no pausing, no breathing, and just running. And that's like a normal for so many people because we're just constantly on, we're constantly available, that we have to be very, very conscious about stepping off of that wheel and inserting moments of conscious relaxation. That doesn't mean sleeping necessarily. It just is like literally breathing into the deeper channels of our bodies to activate a whole different cascade of physiology in our bodies. Having come from medicine, it's like now what I know about the mind-body connection and looking at what the actual chronic diseases are, the top 10 killers of people in industrialized nations, they're stress related, chronic stress related. So our bodies have a stress response that's designed to be used in short bursts for certain situations. But so many of us are living now in states of chronic stress where we don't even remember what relaxation is anymore. And this is a huge dilemma, another epidemic. But because it's normalized, if we want to actually do this for ourselves, it takes conscious, not effort, but awareness of putting it into our day, taking, stretch breaks, breathing breaks, water, nutrition, movement, especially since it's so easy to just be glued to a screen. These are all things that, that's where I started with all of these things that I just named. And they open up a space because actually, here's the thing. Our wisdom, our truth is already inside us. It's already inside every cell of our body. We know what we want to be doing, what feels aligned and healthy. We know that. It's just what have we piled on top and, what has been piled on us, like inherited, and then what have we also piled on by our own life experience and then our sense of obligation that blocks us from what we know to be true. And all of these things just help us to return to a connection with what's already there. And I find that to be very, very reassuring because it's like, I don't have to really go out and get a whole bunch of stuff and put it in me. More of the work is actually letting it go, but coming in to myself with a lot of awareness and a lot of attention. And I think that's a big challenge right now in this moment in society, is our attention is being pulled in so many directions. So a big part of self-care is directing your attention at your inner self, becoming very curious about your own experiences and trusting that by focusing on ourselves with loving attention, with no judgment, and with total acceptance for everything that shows up, including the painful things, the difficult things, and the amazing things, that when we have practiced that kind of attention on ourselves, it really does open up the ability to feel those feelings of empathy and compassion for others and build better relationships. Because I think a lot of people hear the word self-care, less now than 10 years ago, but some people still are thinking, oh, I don't have time for that, or I can't do that because it's selfish. I have all these other responsibilities. But there's a lot of trust that when we do these things for ourselves, they ripple out, they enhance everyone around us because we're more full.
Thank you for sharing that. And it is true. Some of these things I practice every day, and it's a great way to start to just focus on yourself and shut down that phone, because that one of my biggest detriments is my phone being the first thing I grab when I wake up in the morning, and then I overload my brain with all the stimuli about how the world's supposed to look like and what other people are doing, that I'm not focusing on what I want to do. Or, if I need to take a day off, like I should take a day off and go by the beach and just watch nature and breathe in the air. So I really appreciate you sharing that, because it's so important to other people. And I want you to share a little bit more information about the ebook that you have provided for the audience. Is it a free ebook? Like, I would love to know.
Yes, it's a free ebook, and it all started, you'll see that there's this piece of art. I want to show, this is the original art, but there's this piece of art in there that is mine, that is the central image of the book. You'll have to read it to find out. But it talks about the 5 areas that have been the most important new ways of being that I have discovered. And really it's about how do we encounter the unknown and keep encountering the next unknown. So it's called The Map of the Territory, Notes of Encouragement for Stepping into Your Next Unknown. And the 5 areas are self-care, cycles of change, creativity, embodiment, and empathy. And so I write a little bit of a story about each of those areas and how I've experienced them. And I give some questions for readers to explore their own experience, and then a practice or 2 that they can try in their own lives related to each of those areas. So I'm very, very excited to have been inspired by you to actually write that down. It's the last 10 years of my life. I distilled down, and I know that it's probably a much bigger book someday, but this is a good start for people who are just curious about what else is possible. And I always like to say, this industry is very filled with people wanting to position themselves as experts and gurus, because you kind of have to do that to sell things. But I just wanted to really share my own experience and say everyone's life is very unique. And if there's anything here that you can take now that feels like something ripe, not right, but ripe for you to try to do that, but to leave the rest for later or even never, because I have no idea whether my experiences will apply to you or anyone reading it, but it's just an offer and a gift of just sharing something of what I lived, with the hope that there's something there for someone.
That's fantastic. And I'll be linking your free offer on below this video. So for the audience who are watching, you have access to this. I highly encourage taking advantage of it, because as we all know, there's so many similarities between human beings in general. Even if your experiences are unique to you, the underlying message is always the same. Take care of yourself and experience for you, and not try to live to someone else's expectations, because life is different for everybody. So I want to thank you so much, Dr. Lisa, for being on here and for sharing your wisdom and your experience with us. And thank the audience for participating, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next episode.
Thank you,
Bye.
Nikki.
Thank
Everybody.
you.
Bye.